So now this is the most sought after topic and most important topic that they can ask you in exams is pathological findings in COVID-19. So let's quickly see what all we need to know in this. Okay, so we'll keep this session short and sweet so that you can remember it, most of it. Okay, you can remember most of it. Okay, right. So now coming to COVID-19, as you all know that COVID-19 evolved rapidly from the epidemic outbreak in China, and it infects the cells by attaching to ACE2 receptor, and it can affect nearly all the organs of the body, but most predominant effect is on the hematopoietic and immune system and respiratory system. So these three systems are mostly affected: respiratory, hematological and immune. Okay, so let's look at the case first and then we'll go by it. So this is a 47-year-old COVID positive male. He presented with fever, cough and respiratory distress, and when he did his routine CBC, you found that the WBC count was high, the neutrophil count was little higher, lymphocyte count was little lower. Okay, eosinophils were also lower side, platelet count was mildly reduced, and hemoglobin was also reduced. So you saw this patient and his whole global template of the CBC was affected. So now let us see how does COVID actually manifest. When we talk about hematological manifestations, you should always know that because COVID virus attaches to ACE2 receptors, lymphocytes have plenty of ACE2 receptors. So they are the ones which get affected the most. So patient will present with lymphopenias. Okay, but along with that, there is also abundant release of inflammatory cytokines. So usually neutrophil count increases. So if we have to see the global template of the COVID-19, you should know that WBC count will be a little higher, neutrophil count will be a little higher, lymphocytes are going to fall down, eosinophils are going to fall down, and hemoglobin and platelet are also going to be low. Now, what are the most common hematological findings that you see in COVID-19 then? So, we have just now discussed the same thing that happens is this. So, it affects whole global template. Now, how does the findings progress? So, everybody should know that there is an incubation period of about 1 to 14 days, okay, when the virus enters. So, there are no specific symptoms, and in this phase, the lymphocyte count is normal or slightly reduced. Approximately 7 to 14 days from the onset of initial symptoms, now immediately cytokine storm starts, in which lots of cytokines are released, which we will talk about later, and this is associated with severe lymphopenia. Now, so hematological manifestations, as we have discussed, we have lymphocytopenia, which is a predominant finding here, we have thrombocytopenia, and we have lymphopenia. Okay, so everything we have leukopenia. So we lymphocytopenia, we have leukopenia and thrombocytopenia. So remember, leukocytosis usually occurs, okay, but there can be leukopenia also. But usually predominant finding of all the hematological finding is lymphopenia. Okay, that is lymphocytopenia. So lymphocyte count is going to fall down. Okay, now what are the causes of lymphopenia? If you have to see the causes of lymphopenia in COVID, we should know that. So just now I've told you, these lymphocytes have a lot of ACE2 receptors and the COVID virus attaches to them and causes lymphocytopenia. Second, there is cytokine storm, which is typically occurring in COVID. So these cytokine storm releases lots and lots of mediator which causes lymphocyte apoptosis. Third, what happens is, because there is so much of cytokine storm, it will cause atrophy of the lymphoid organs, and this will impair the lymphocyte turnover. And the last, the patient also has lactic acid acidosis. Okay, so this can also inhibit lymphocyte proliferation. So all these total effects that are occurring in COVID causes lymphopenias. Now, if we have to say what are the causes of thrombocytopenia in COVID, okay, so we have thrombocytopenia, but remember 2 points here. The thrombocytopenia is always milder and it doesn't causes bleeding, okay, so it's usually mild and it doesn't cause bleeding, okay. So now, first, cytokine storm destroys the platelet progenitors in the bone marrow. So obviously, when the progenitors are destroyed, it causes thrombocytopenia. Second, what happens is this lung injury. So when this lung injury, we will see later, it consumes all the platelets. So here we have hyaline membrane disease where fibrin and platelets are consumed. So patient automatically presents with mild thrombocytopenia. And third, there is increase in the antibodies against the platelets, which are rapidly cleared by the spleen. So again, it presents with thrombocytopenia. So all these three events account for thrombocytopenia, which occurs in COVID-19. Now, so remember, so which cell increases in COVID-19? Neutrophils usually increases and the rest will fall down. Okay. Now, there is a very important parameter which we use in COVID-19. This is called as neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. Why is it important? So they found that if a patient has high neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, there is more chances of death during hospitalization. And so there was a common parameter which said that NLR ratio should be done in all COVID-19 patients, okay, who require hospitalization. Okay, now if you look at the peripheral smear of patients of COVID, the findings are going to be very important again. The patient is going to have lymphopenia, you already know, but lymphopenia is associated with reactive lymphocytes, okay? So any viral infections are associated with reactive lymphocytes. So here also you see lymphocytes with abundant blue cytoplasm, they become reactive lymphocytes. That's number one. Number two, the important finding that was seen here was that some of the lymphocytes become lymphoplasmacytoid. These are also type of reactive lymphocytes. Okay, so here we have a lot of reactive lymphocyte. There is a lot of dysmyelopoiesis which can be seen, and most important again, the platelets are going to be little larger. Okay, so even though there is thrombocytopenia, bone marrow precursors try to produce more platelets, and in a way they cause thrombocytopenia, which you always remember. Now, coagulopathy is very common in COVID patients. So coagulopathy in COVID is a very, very important finding which you should always know, and it has to be distinguished from DIC. So coagulopathy in COVID has to be differentiated from DIC. So how do we know that? What happens in CIC, coagulopathy in COVID? Remember, PT, APTT are increased. Okay, so APTT and PT are increased. Here fibrinogen count is increased. Here fibrinogen is increased, whereas in DIC fibrinogen decreases. Okay, so here fibrinogen is increased, okay, because it's also type of acute phase reactant, so it increases here. FDPs are increased, D dimers are increased, and platelets are mildly decreased. So remember, coagulopathy in COVID is associated with increased PT and APTT. There is increase in FDP and D dimers. There is increased fibrinogen, and platelet count decreases. So now remember, if they ask you, is there any coagulation factor whose level is increased in COVID, it is factor 8, because it's an acute phase reactant, and that is why it appears little more. Now, so if you look at what are the complications that can occur because of this. Now, because there is elevated D-dimer, there is increased PT, there is increased FDP, all these are more prone to develop thromboembolism. So the incidence or chances of thromboembolism are very, very common in COVID. Now, so I have just now told you that COVID has to be differentiated from DIC. So there are three important points which you should remember which help in differentiating COVID from DIC. First, the fibrinogen levels are usually increased in COVID-induced coagulopathy. Second, PT and APTT both are increased in CIC, but PT is usually more elevated than APTT, which does not occur in DIC. So here PT is more elevated. Third, thrombocytopenia is usually mild. Okay, thrombocytopenia is usually mild, whereas in DIC it's severe. Also, no microangiopathy is present. You know, DIC is a very important cause of microangiopathy. So you see schistocytes in DIC, but you don't see that in your COVID-induced coagulopathy, which should be very, very clear to you. Now, once you are clear with that, we know that there is a hypercoagulable state which is present in COVID, and this is because of the parameters which are increased, which we have already discussed. Okay. Now, let's come to the next system which is affected in COVID is immune system. So, immune system is majoritarily affected in COVID. Okay. So, remember here, because of cytokine storm, there is increase in lot of mediators, especially interleukin 6, interleukin 8 and interleukin 2 receptors. So I hope you know interleukin 2 receptors are present on regulatory T cells. Okay, so they are present on regulatory T cells. Okay, so these interleukin 2 receptors basically stimulate regulatory T cells. So regulatory T cells are increased. Regulatory T cells, everybody know, they suppress the immune system. They suppress the immune system. So they play bad role for us because regulatory T cells are increased. Your immune system is going to get suppressed. Now there is suppression of lymphocytes. So there is no difference between which is CD4 is reduced or CD8 is reduced. There's no inversion in that. So both are reduced. Okay. So there is rapid exhaustion of CD8 cells also. So there's no inversion of 4 or 8, but CD8 cells are rapidly exhausted, and all of you know it is CD8 cells which are important in killing the viruses. So that becomes a major problem here. So look at the biochemical finding. If we are looking at what is a biochemical finding which we look in the COVID, everybody knows that LDH levels will be increased. Ferritin is an acute phase reactant, so it will be increased. Procalcitonin will be increased, and interleukin 6 is increased. Cytokine storm increases this. So all these parameters are increased. So there are a lot of labs which are doing biochemical tests in COVID. So these are the usual markers that they do, okay, to identify whether they are increased or not. Now, when we talk about these, we should always know which all interleukins are increased, which I have just told you. Interleukin 2 receptor, interleukin 6 and interleukin 8 are more important, and interleukin 10 is also increased. Okay. Apart from that, these biochemical parameters are increased. So this was what constitute your cytokine storm, which usually occurs after 10th day of the infection. Okay, now let's look at the finding in the lungs in COVID. So everybody should remember what happens in lungs in COVID is that there are formation of these hyaline membranes. So why do hyaline membranes form in the lung? So let's understand the pathogenesis here. Everybody should know here. Okay, so main trigger here is endothelial injury. This endothelial injury activates macrophages. Okay, so whenever there is a lot of endothelial injury, it activates macrophages. To just draw a diagram, all of you know these are the alveoli, and just adjoining the alveoli we have the capillaries here, and these capillaries are lined by endothelial cells, and this space that is present in between, normally this is negligible, you can't see this place. This is called interstitium. What is this called? Interstitium. So if you look at the structure of your lung, these are the alveoli, these are the capillaries, and these are the interstitium. So normally what happens in COVID is, first thing that happens is injury to the endothelium. So as soon as the endothelium is damaged, immediately macrophages come here in action. Immediately macrophages come in action. So these macrophages start releasing some mediators, especially interleukin 8. This interleukin 8 is a very strong trigger for neutrophil. I hope everybody knows interleukin 8 is the other name for alpha chemokine. It recruits neutrophils. So all these neutrophils start coming into the vessels. Now they start entering into the interstitium. So what happens is, now all these cells enter into the interstitium and they cause widening of the interstitium. So interstitium gets widened. Okay, so interstitium gets widened. Later on, these neutrophils, if I look at the alveoli, you all know that alveoli is lined by type 1 pneumocytes, and we also have type 2 pneumocytes here. Okay, so as soon as the neutrophils enter into the alveoli, they cause damage to type 1 pneumocytes initially. So these neutrophils damage type 1 pneumocytes initially. Now because type 1 pneumocytes are damaged, this patient starts presenting with hypoxemia. He starts presenting with hypoxemia. Now second is, they also damage type 2 pneumocytes. Now all of you know that type 2 pneumocytes basically secrete surfactant. So because surfactant is now not released, this causes collapse of the glomeruli. This causes collapse of the glomeruli. So you can see some glomeruli are collapsed, some are normal. Okay, so you can see collapse of the glomeruli. Now because the lining of type 1 pneumocytes is damaged here, so here I'm going to just go to the alveoli again. Now because the type 1 pneumocytes are denuded here, okay, so immediately somebody needs to heal it up. Okay, so immediately platelets come into action. So immediately platelets start repair. So platelets come into action. Slowly platelets are replaced by coagulation system. Okay, slowly platelets are replaced by coagulation system. So immediately fibrin, okay, is formed here. When the coagulation system is activated, immediately fibrin is formed here. So you see this fibrin lining the alveoli. When this fibrin lines the alveoli, this is what is called as hyaline membrane disease. What is this called as? Hyaline membrane disease. Or this is also called as diffuse alveolar damage, or this is also called as ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, or this is also called as acute lung injury. So all things are same. Do you remember if I say this trolley? So this is true transfusion associated lung injury. So please remember this lung injury. Here if somebody asks you what is the main trigger for lung injury in cases of COVID, or what is the main trigger? So it is always endothelial injury which is the main trigger. What is the most important finding in the lung in COVID? This is formation of hyaline membranes. So this is the most common finding. Which is the main mediator which causes the damage in forming ALI? This is interleukin 8, which is the main cell which is the culprit here, neutrophil. So everybody should know these steps, and then only you can understand this. Once this damage has occurred, if the person survives, this will start repairing. Okay, and repairing will lead to proliferation of type 2 pneumocytes, and again macrophages which damaged, they release a lot of cytokines like PDGF which helps in repair. So type 2 pneumocytes are going to proliferate and a lot of cytokines are going to help in repair. Okay, so that will happen later on. So that's the cause and the mechanism of lung injury in COVID, which everybody should be very clear. Okay, so that's the mechanism. Now once you're clear with the mechanism, now let's come to some of the other questions that can be asked in COVID. There was a test which was designed in COVID. This is called FELUDA. So FELUDA is nothing but, this is FN-Cas9 editor limited uniform detection assay. So this is based on CRISPR, and this technology became very, very important in identifying and diagnosing, making a rapid diagnosis in cases of COVID. So everybody, we have discussed about CRISPR in genetics, so please go and read about it from there. Okay, so that's your FELUDA test which is used for COVID. Okay, now let's come to another question that became very prominent question here, plasma therapy. What about the plasma therapy in COVID? So yes, plasma therapy is given. Why do we give plasma therapy? There are some people who are very debilitated, very old, who cannot make antibodies against COVID. Okay, so what do you do in such patients? So you need, in such patients, you basically need somebody, you need a donor somebody who is already infected and already made antibodies against COVID. So what do? You take out these antibodies from the plasma of the people who are already infected with COVID, and you give these antibodies to those people who actually need it, who cannot make the antibody, who are very debilitated. So you give them, and once you give them a better chance to survive against COVID. So but problem is that this antibody should be given before 10 days, okay, of their infection. So any person who is infected and you know that he's a very debilitated person, ideally you should give him plasma therapy before 10 days. Why before 10 days? Because after 10 days cytokine storm is going to start, and then these antibodies are not going to do anything because the whole system is going to collapse after that. That is why it has to be given to the person before 10 days. Okay, now whose antibodies you should ideally take? You should take an antibodies usually from males and females who have never become pregnant. Why so? Because we have already started this in transplant rejection also. So females usually, whenever they are multiparous female, they have so many different type of antibodies in their plasma. We just can't risk it. Okay, Okay, maybe the person will get sensitized to different other types of antibodies. So therefore, in cases of COVID, if you have to take plasma from somebody, you should take it from men, or you should take it from the females who have never become pregnant. And the law of blood transfusion is same, 18 to 65. Here the weight, okay, they have decreased the weight. Okay, so here the weight they have standardized, it should be more than 50 kg. Okay, it should be more than 50 kg. And a patient should earlier be COVID positive, and now he has developed antibodies. So these antibodies usually develop after 14 days. Okay, so usually after 14 days we should see, and they have also given the titer of antibodies. Okay, so how much should be the titer of antibodies? That is what is important here. So they say that if IgG antibody against COVID-19 has a titer of 1 is to more than 640, or by chemiluminescence, which you do normally nowadays, it should be at least 13 absorbance unit, or you have neutralizing antibody of 1 is to 80 titer. Then this is the required concentration of antibodies which we should take. So you should have a sero survey, find that you have a good number of antibodies, and then you are eligible to donate your plasma. So is everybody clear with this? Yes. Now remember always, what is the rules that you should follow in a recipient? First, you have to give it an early stage, that is not later than 10 days. Okay, so you have to give him before 10 days, usually after 3rd day. Okay, so usually after 3rd day and before 10th day. And this person should not have any antibody. It should not have any antibody. That's another point. Okay, and of course you should take a consent. So this guidelines were given by ICMR, which you should follow. Okay, so that's the criteria for plasmapheresis in COVID patient, and you should be knowing this. Okay, now let's see how to identify how many of the patients are going to have more mortality or are going into sepsis. So they devised a scoring system called as SOFA score. What is SOFA score? Sequential Organ Failure Assessment Score. Okay, so this score basically takes into account nearly all the body organ systems and how they are responding. Like, let's start with up. Okay, CNS. So in nervous system, basically we do Glasgow Coma scale and we see it. Okay, coming down to respiratory system, we take typically PaO2, FiO2 levels. Okay, and cardiovascular system, mean arterial pressure. Okay, liver, bilirubin. Okay, kidney, creatinine, and the blood, coagulation. And in coagulation, we typically consider platelet. Okay, so platelet count is considered. This was called as SOFA score, but it was quite cumbersome to do, so they came up with a new score called quick SOFA score. So quick SOFA score was devised to identify the group of people who are going to develop sepsis and who are going to have more mortality than the others. So how did they devise was that to identify organ dysfunction in people, and that will require extensive management. So how do they devise? They said only 3 parameters should be done here. Okay, 3 main. So starting from the brain. Okay, so altered mental status. If the person is having altered mental status, you are going to give score 1. Second is your respiratory system and cardiac system. In respiratory system, if your respiratory rate is more than 22, that was again given 1. And third is blood pressure. If the blood pressure is low, this is also going to be 1. So if any person who is going to have more than 2 score, this means this person has organ dysfunction. Okay, so remember we give 1 score for each. CNS, okay, altered mental status, respiratory rate is going to be, if it is respiratory rate is high, and if mean arterial pressure is high, then 1 1 1, and this is 3. And if your score is more than 2, that means organ dysfunction is present. Okay, that's what is called quick SOFA score, quickly to assess organ dysfunction and development of sepsis in people, and also to assess more mortality. Okay, so that was your quick SOFA score, which was devised. So now let's talk about the most sought after topic, that is COVID vaccines. Okay, see, when the COVID spread in the world, there was a point that the only way to prevent it is by developing vaccination. So a lot of research was going over all over the world, and there were a lot of tentative vaccines which were suggested. Okay, so there was inactivated vaccine, attenuated vaccine, viral vector vaccine, subunit vaccine, and nucleotide based vaccine. Okay, so a lot of research was going on all over the world. So we are going to focus ourselves to India. Okay, so in India, basically we came up with 2 vaccines. Okay, one is called Covishield, the other is called Covaxin, and majority of the COVID vaccines are based upon spike protein. Okay, so they are focused on corona spike protein and its variant, that as the major antigenic determinant. So now let's understand what is the difference between these 2 vaccines. Okay, now coming first to Covaxin. Okay, so when we talk about Covaxin, this is made by Bharat Biotech, and this vaccine has actually a dead virus. Okay, so it's made up of dead virus. So what do you mean by this? Inactivated virus. See, in this what we do is we take the virus. Okay, we take the virus and we make it inactive, we make it dead by using beta propiolactone. Okay, so with the help of beta propiolactone, we make this virus dead. So its viral genes get inactivated. But spike protein is intact. And the genes inside gets inactivated. Now what do we do is, as soon as we inject this vaccine into people, you know what happens in immunity. Antigen presenting cells are going to eat up this inactivated gene virus which has intact spike proteins. So it will recognize spike protein as a foreign protein, and it will go and immediately give this to T cells. T cells will immediately induce B cells to make antibodies against this spike protein. So this person is going to have a lot of antibodies formed against the spike protein. Okay, so now when we are giving this virus, it is usually given along with, you have to add certain catalyst so that the antibody response is going to be faster and better. Okay, so this vaccine which was launched, its efficacy is still yet not known. Okay, its efficacy is yet not known because its third phase search is still pending. So we don't know the efficacy of this vaccine yet. It is proposed that the third phase data results are going to come out in March. Okay, so this is your Covaxin, which has been launched in India. Okay, so the side effect of this vaccine is very few till now. We have seen so many doctors getting this vaccine, and there are very few side effects which are noted with Covaxin for now. Okay, so India has a lot of experience with inactivated vaccines. Okay, so Covaxin, that is why probably was a good launch, and the side effects are very less. But how effective is this vaccine going to be? It's yet to be known. Okay, now let's look at the second vaccine which came up. So this vaccine was called Covishield. Okay, Covishield. Covishield vaccine has been launched at other places in the world also. So Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, so Covishield vaccine is already a research product. It is launched by Serum Institute of India. And if we talk about this vaccine, this is a viral vector vaccine. Okay, what do you understand by viral vector vaccine? Is that we basically take a viral vector. Okay, we basically take a viral vector. So here basically we have adenovirus which we have taken. So this adenovirus basically attacks chimpanzees. It causes mild influenza in chimpanzees. So what we have done is, so we have taken this virus vector, we have taken adenovirus, and we have infected this with the coronavirus spike gene. So we have, this virus has been infected by coronavirus spike gene, and now this enters into the body, and of course there is extensive immune response against this virus. So this type of vaccine is Covishield, and adenovirus is another virus which has been infected by spike protein. So this vaccine is Covishield. Okay, so this vaccine has been launched by Serum Institute of India, and its efficacy is at approximately 70% for now, according to the literature. And there has been some reports of anaphylactic reaction with this, which is common with any vaccine. Okay, and also Covaxin also has given a list of things, a list of people who should not take Covaxin. People who are on blood thinners should not take Covaxin. People who have history of allergy should not take Covaxin. Similarly, Covishield has chances of anaphylaxis, so you should be pretty sure that when you're taking this vaccine, you're nearby some hospital where if you get anaphylactic or if you get some allergy, you are taken care of. Okay, so that is Covishield. Apart from that, there are a lot of other targets also, like nucleic acid vaccine has also been launched, in which the nucleic acid is released and put into the body. So this is the experience with nucleic acid vaccine is not there in humans, so they are trying this with COVID virus. Okay, so what do we do here? Either you just inject mRNA or you inject the DNA containing the spike gene, and as soon as you give it into the person, it basically makes a protein, so against which the immune response is given. So this is a nucleic acid vaccine which is also being developed in COVID virus. Okay, so in a point, if we talk about in general vaccines, remember we can have attenuated live virus, we can have whole inactivated virus. So this whole inactivated virus is basically a Covaxin, or we can have a protein subunit or recombinant or a peptide vaccine. We have a viral vector vaccine which is your Covishield, and last, this nucleic acid vaccines are being developed in COVID, and it has been launched also in other countries. So this is about COVID vaccines, but we have typically targeted against two vaccines in India, Covaxin and Covishield. If you look at the vaccines, both are like this. Okay, so these are like this. So Covaxin made by Bharat Biotech, which is an inactivated virus, and Covishield, which has adenovirus and in which the spike proteins is injected. So remember, in any of the COVID vaccine, if we talk about what is the immunogenic substance here that we are using is spike protein, and that could be a tentative questions. Okay, so with that we finish an update on COVID vaccines. Yes, and please revise all the important questions that can be asked in COVID before your next NICT exam. Okay, best of luck. Thank you so much.